Ladies and gentlemen, it's a real pleasure to be in Athens. We meet at a time of profound uncertainty in Europe and at increasingly risky times. Our collective security architecture, which our founding fathers and mothers built over decades and at great cost, is in shambles. To frame our discussion today, I wish to offer 5 short points presenting the security challenges we face in Europe and the responses they require. First, the erosion of fundamental norms and principles of international law is one of the biggest challenges we face today. Once rules do not matter to some, they will not matter for anyone, and that becomes a problem for everyone. That is why principles must be applied to all, without exception and double standards, to safeguard our common security. My second point relates to how states are reacting to today's growing instability. Across our region, security postures are hardening, and states are investing more and more in arms. Global military expenditure reached almost $3 trillion in 2025, a 30% increase since 2021, and almost twice the level of military spending at the end of the Cold War. Based on this trend, the UN estimates that global defense spending will double again by 2035 to $6 trillion. Meanwhile, investment in multilateralism, diplomacy, confidence building, and risk reduction continues to fall. I understand the need in insecure times to invest in deterrence, in military deterrence. Hard capabilities can send a signal of resolve, but they also shape threat perceptions and can increase uncertainty. History has taught us that such imbalances do not produce sustainable security. Rather, they can increase mistrust and raise the risk of miscalculation. Security cannot and will never be guaranteed by military deterrence alone. During the Cold War, we managed mistrust through dialogue too, and this ultimately yielded historic breakthroughs. We will need to recover that same spirit. Third, the difficult situation is compounded by the pace of technology. Artificial intelligence is advancing more rapidly than the rules governing it. Cyber capabilities and autonomous systems, including drones, have radically changed the speed and character of war. The idea of a fixed front line is increasingly outdated. The theater of operations has expanded across both the physical and cyber domains. We see this every day in Ukraine, and we see it more and more around Ukraine too, including not far away from these shores in recent months. Taken together, these developments are making the security environment more unstable and more unpredictable. Against this backdrop, and here I get to my fourth point, the network of arms control agreements and norms that we had developed over decades has been abandoned or fallen into misuse. The expiration of New START earlier this year means that, for the first time in more than half a century, we are operating in a world without a functioning US-Russia nuclear arms control agreement. Key conventional arms control pillars, such as the Treaty on Conventional Armed Forces in Europe and the Treaty on Open Skies, have effectively ceased to function. Their absence means that today, even small incidents can carry serious consequences. At the same time, we must be honest, these instruments were designed for a different era. Since then, military doctrines and capabilities have evolved significantly. Forces are more mobile, more precise, and more integrated across domains, rendering traditional arms control approaches based on static numerical ceilings increasingly obsolete. This is why adaptation of our tools is necessary. My fifth and last point relates to the future. Where does all this take us? What we need now more than ever, is to step back before we reach the edge of the cliff. Stop now and begin rebuilding a security dialogue that can gradually lay the foundation of a more stable European security architecture. This will not happen overnight. First and foremost, we need to create the conditions for serious diplomatic engagement on ending the war in Ukraine through a negotiated settlement. It is everyone's duty to support efforts to end the war and support the sides to resume negotiations to that end. And once the war ends, we need an honest discussion on how we got here, what went wrong, and how to rebuild a functioning security architecture in Europe. We are at a critical juncture. The risks of escalation are serious, and they are only growing. We need to manage these risks that would otherwise continue to threaten our common European security. We cannot change geography, but we can choose how to manage it. I believe this requires dialogue, it requires transparency, it requires mechanisms that reduce risks and prevent escalation. Above all, it remains in the interest of each and every one of us to build a more stable and predictable security environment in our geography. Ladies and gentlemen, this organization, the organization I represent, the OSCE, remains uniquely placed to host and facilitate that discussion. It is the only regional security organization where all key actors, including those on opposite sides, sit around the same table. Even and especially in times of profound disagreement, diplomacy remains our most powerful tool to reduce tensions, to manage risks in the context of mistrust. The OSCE was founded on a simple but enduring recognition: security cannot be built against one another. As hard as it may be, it must be built with one another. That principle has not changed, and our responsibility to uphold it has never been greater.